director position, I do get my feet wet in a little bit of everything. So I do a lot with clients in terms of managing the relationship, working with them to come up with strategic plans on how to launch their company or their brands. We do work with a lot of startups, so that's a big focus for us. Additionally, I get to work a lot with the internal staff here and train them and help them and kind of, guide them in crafting their PR skills in terms of working with clients and then also working with media.
As a PR manager, very similar in terms of what the day-to-day is in terms of client relations, making sure that we're reporting all of our weekly activity to clients and managing any requests on their end. Also just continuing to use proactive media outreach, like she mentioned, creating unique strategies and kind of taking those to fruition. So not only coming up with the strategy, but putting together an actual pitch to go out with the media, getting the approval from clients, and then moving into the whole pitching stage of proactively reaching out, garnering coverage, and then putting together the reports, assisting with also managing interns as well as specialists in creating those reports and giving them feedback in terms of the work that they're working on as well.
Definitely changed a lot, even in the last couple of years. I hear stories from some of our older colleagues, how they used to run to the fax machine and fax their press releases over to newsrooms. That definitely does not happen anymore. Even in the last couple of years, 3 years ago, it was all about sending a pitch that was very descriptive of what your client does and then following up with a phone call. Today, people don't really use the phones anymore. Reporters don't like it, they hate it, and it kind of gives them a bad vibe to start with if you're gonna kind of hassle them like that. What we recommend doing is not creating a really long pitch, creating something that's only 2, 3, maybe 4 sentences long, that's really short, concise, and gets your point across. You're more likely going to get on their radar. Definitely subject lines are important too. If you don't have a catchy subject line, they're just going to delete your email right away. I've worked with clients before where we've gotten really creative and kind of gutsy in terms of what our subject lines look like, and that usually always really helps. You have to make sure your client is obviously on board with doing something like that, and as long as you have their approval and they're okay with it, using gutsy subject lines, it's going to get them to open the email, which is the first step. And making sure you get your point across within the first sentence or two is key, because if you don't and you have something that's 4 or 5 paragraphs long, they're going to get lost in the email and they're just going to hit delete. We also use social media a lot too when pitching. We work with reporters. This also helps in terms of just building a relationship with them in general. But if we see that they're tweeting out a story that they just wrote, we might follow up to that tweet and say, hey, this is great. Like, here's a competitor you should check out. Additionally, it works really well in terms of building relationships. If you're working with a reporter, you're trying to get on their radar, but you might not necessarily have a client that fits their beat at that moment, or you might not have any news and they want news. Following up with them for non-clients is always really important too. I've worked with tons and tons of reporters before and giving them leads and sources that aren't my clients. That really helps me get on their radar, so next time they see my email come in or they see a tweet from me, my name will kind of pop in their head and they'll be more apt to open it and look and see what I have to say. So in terms of who we're following, it definitely depends on who our clients are. Like I said, we work with a lot of startups. A lot of those startups are in the tech space. So a lot of the reporters that we're emailing and contacting on a day-to-day basis are technology startup reporters. With that said, when we pitch stories, we get really creative. Not all of our clients have news all the time. They might not have anything to talk about. So we kind of really dive deep into who they are and what they do to come up with those creative stories. We have one client, for example, who just has a really cool culture at their office. They have walking treadmills, they do housing stipends, they do catered meals. It's really cool how they treat their employees. So we use that as a pitch idea. We took this atmosphere and this work-life balance internally at their company, and we've pitched it, and reporters really love it, and a lot of people have picked up on it. So it's kind of figuring out, what the reporter likes, what they cover, and then figuring out how our client can fit into that.
Yeah, and I think going off of what Liz said, and this kind of backtracks to like the subject lines and kind of how the new digital age has changed PR. It's just like Liz mentioned, like making sure your subject line is really catchy, because today the inboxes are flooded with anything from spam to actual internal work emails to every PR folk in the country reaching out to them for stories. So really just making sure that whatever it is that you're pitching them not only is relevant for that reporter, and that's I think where social can come into play as well, where you're following reporters or staying on the radar of even just outlets and seeing the stories that are coming out and really following their coverage and really getting an idea for what it is that they're interested in, what kinds of things you can offer them as new stories and new ideas or resources for future stories they may be working on. I think that's something that we really try and master here, is utilizing all of our resources to really get to know every reporter that we're reaching out to, making sure that if, like Liz mentioned, if there's somebody that really doesn't want you to give them a phone call, they feel that that's intrusive, you certainly want to be making sure that we're maintaining those relationships and really developing those relationships with them on a variety of platforms, from, like email, but also on social, following them, retweeting their articles, and really just trying to make sure that we stay on the radar and can keep our clients on the radar as well.
There's no one way, this is what you do and it's gonna work. You need to get creative in how you reach out to people. I always say research is key. So when I'm teaching people how to pitch and where to start, it's all in the research. So say you have this idea, this pitch angle that you want to try to get placed someplace. Pick an outlet and target that outlet. Say that I have, just going back to the work-life balance angle, this really cool work-life balance, you have an awesome culture internally, no one else is really doing it. So I have this angle, I'm gonna find an outlet. Say I wanna target the Wall Street Journal. I'm gonna go to the Wall Street Journal and I'm gonna research. I'm gonna put in keywords of what my pitch contains. I'm gonna look up reporters and what they're covering. I'm gonna look up editors and to see what they're talking about, what they're doing. And from there, then I take my research to the next level. Then I'll go on social channels. I'm a really big fan of Muckrake. If you've heard of that, I use that a lot. It's pretty accurate in terms of giving you the beats for reporters. It basically pulls information from their Twitter feeds. So I'll use that as a starting point. And then, I'll go to their Twitter profile. If I'm not following them, I follow them. Go to their Facebook page. If, I haven't already liked them or, friend requested them, I'll do that. Friend requesting is a little bit different. Depending on the relationship, if I've already have one established, I would friend them, but most journalists nowadays just have you can like their page. Excuse me. So I'll go through all the social channels, make sure this person's really great, and then I'll read what they're writing. What are they talking about? What interests them? So then when I write my pitch, it's not just copy paste, here's my pitch. I'm gonna talk to them like they're a human being and comment on what they're writing about. I always try to offer my opinion within the first sentence of a previous story that they might have written to show them that I care and that I'm reading, what they're writing. And then I'll offer up my client as a resource and kind of give them the story angle there.
Yeah, and I think going along with what Liz said, there really is no exact formula. It really is going to be dependent on what reporter you're going out to, and that's where the research really comes into play. But things like knowing kind of how they prefer to be contacted, those kinds of things, if it's not something that's available on some sort of search engine like a Muckrack or a Cision, for example.
Or even their profiles too.
Right.
On the website, Wall Street Journal will have author profiles. TechCrunch has the author profiles.
Yeah.
What's the other one?
TechCrunch.
Okay.
Pretty much any outlet, Mashable, all of those outlets will usually have hey, I cover X, Y, and Z. Pitch me over email. Do not call me. Whatever they prefer.
I think it's also once you start working with reporters and kind of get to know them, also it's almost like a trial kind of an error thing, where when you reach out to one person and maybe you contact them and then you called them one time, and we've actually had reporters reach back out and say I really am not looking to be contacted over the phone. It's just something of filing that away and remembering that, and just continuing to build that relationship with reporters and keeping in mind, how they want to be contacted. And like Liz was saying, also like building that relationship further and commenting on things that they've written in their stories, but also just like we continuously are researching everything that they do, even being a little bit more conversational, taking that next step of knowing their personal interests and highlighting things like that when reaching out, or you saw they tweeted something that you can relate to, responding to it, anything like that, that just creates more of that human factor.